Chapter 7. If you're looking at the PowerPoints that I posted, they say Chapter 8, but it's our Chapter 7. The PowerPoints are from a newer edition of the book, and they've changed up what's in the chapters a little bit. All right, so Chapter 7 talks about internal control. And typically, we're talking a lot about cache, okay, in this particular chapter. All right, so internal control is the things that are in place. So the controls that are in place to protect our assets. Mainly, there's other things if you look at the definition here. Encourage employees to follow company policies, operational efficiency, accurate, reliable accounting records. You know, there's a lot of things that go into it. Protect our assets is probably the one we think about most often. For me, I think it's protect the assets and then the accurate and reliable accounting records. All right, and y'all are familiar, you may not know it, but you're familiar with some types of internal controls. So if you think about Walmart, when you go in, there's somebody standing at the door. And for instance, if you're bringing something back to return, they usually put a little sticker on it before you go return it so that they've seen you walk in with the item. That means it makes it harder for you to go pick up something from the store, not pay for it, and then take it back and return it and get your money back on it. All right? They usually have to require that you have that yellow sticker on it before they'll give you your money back, especially if you don't have the receipt for it. You'll also notice that there's people at the doors just kind of watching to make sure that you've paid for the items before you walk out with them. That's another reason why later at night they close one door and everybody has to go out the same door so that they can make sure, you know, they don't want to have people there all night if they don't need to, but they can make sure that you're not taking anything. So we're familiar with that type of stuff. Let's see, we already talked about that. Sarbanes-Oxley is one of the things, companies have to have a system of internal control. And when you're a publicly traded corporation, it actually has to be audited. You have to have a report on your internal control that ensures investors that your internal control procedures are working. This was part of Sarbanes-Oxley. Sarbanes-Oxley came out in the early 2000s. There were a lot of accounting scandals in the late 90s that, well, I'm sure they've been happening a long time, but these were big ones that came to light in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and the result was Sarbanes-Oxley. You may have heard of Enron, big oil and gas company that went under, and then Arthur Andersen was their accounting firm, and both Enron and Arthur Andersen are no more because of the scandal. And Sarbanes-Oxley is one of the results. All right, I like their little acronym here with respect to internal control. So CRIME is the acronym for the components of internal control. You have control procedures, risk assessment, information system, monitoring of controls, and the environment within which you're in. Some controls procedures that some of y'all might be familiar with. If you've ever been a cashier, you have to close out your drawer at the end of your shift, and then you check to make sure that's what is in your drawer matches what's on the closeout ticket. All right, that's a method of internal control. A couple of things that are big procedures. Separation of duties is one of them. So if I'm working at Walmart and I'm the cashier, I'm probably not also the same person that takes the money to the bank and deposits it, because that would give me too much access to the cash, okay? That would give me more of an ability to pocket some cash, and if I'm also the one depositing it in the checking account, who's going to necessarily know that I'm doing that? Oh gosh, excuse me. So if you're a big company, then you're going to want to separate your duties out. If you're very small, then you may not have the ability to. You may just have yourself and maybe one other employee, and you can't necessarily separate duties out. Another one that's also big now, especially with online, all the online buying we've been doing, especially in the last year, is encryption and firewalls. Because we do a lot of transactions online, we pay for a lot of goods online. You want to make sure that the security is good with respect to that. One of the problems with internal control is that it's built and set up to prevent fraud or theft by one person, but collusion means that two people are working together. And when you have two people working together, then sometimes they can work around the controls that are in place. That's why I don't know if where your parents might work or where you might work, but sometimes companies force you to take a 2-week vacation because somebody else has to come in and fill your spot. And if you've been doing anything incorrectly or committing some sort of fraud, then it's easier for them to discover that when they put another person into your position. All right, so with respect to cash receipts, and y'all, I'm sorry, I'm not taking a lot of notes on this part because I'm just saying what's on the PowerPoint, so I guess I can make it big. You can see it. So cash receipts, over the counter sales, generally goes into a cash register. And of course, the cash register says how much cash you should have. And when you close out, it's counted either by yourself or a supervisor to make sure that it ties out. All right. A lot of times stuff is received by mail. Hopefully y'all don't mail cash in the mail, but people do mail checks. Not as often as they used to, but you might find with big corporations that they might actually still receive checks in the mail. Generally speaking, a employee would record the check, and maybe even 2 employees might open the mail and record the checks, and then they're forwarded on to somebody else who actually makes the deposit. A lot of times checks don't even go to the company. They go to a post office box at the bank, or that the bank picks up, and then the bank makes a list of the checks that came in the mail and deposits it. So an employee of the company doesn't even handle the cash. So that's just what this is. All right, with respect to cash payments, cash payments are, checks are a type of internal control because you have a record of the payment that you can follow. And typically it has to be signed. So you've got a person that's authorizing it with their signature. And then normally before the signature is given, they double check the check along with the invoice that it's being paid, that's being paid with it, to make sure that it is, an actual invoice and it's money that's truly owed to somebody. All right, so here are some of the examples of things that you might see before a check is actually paid or actually signed. The receiving report that the supplies or product or whatever you purchased was actually received. Well, it would be the purchase order that they were ordered, the bill from the company, and then the report that you actually received them. All those things are matched up, and then the bill is paid. And checks are usually numbered, so you have, every check can be accounted for. If, let's say you had a raffle, if you were doing a fundraiser, and you had a raffle, a good thing to keep in mind with raffles is that if you hand out 30 tickets to somebody, they either need to give you back their tickets or the cash, right? So if your tickets are numbered, then you'll know exactly how many they sold, and they have to give you the cash back or the tickets that haven't been sold. And if they're numbered, you can account for every one of them. Same with checks. They're numbered. They should be numbered. And then you can account for them. All right, one thing that you might have at work is a petty cash fund. Petty cash is usually cash that's just sitting in the office, generally in some of those little gray lock boxes, but it can be used for small supplies, coffee supplies. This one has office donuts, things of that nature. All right, a lot of places maybe you keep $100 in a petty cash box. And with petty cash, what you usually want to find there is either the $100 in cash in there or receipts plus cash adding up to the $100. Okay, you would fill out a petty cash ticket if you bought something. from there. We're not going to have anything on the test on petty cash. I just want you to know what petty cash is. So basically, you set up petty cash, you create an account for petty cash. This one is a $200 account. Then when the money is spent and you put it back in, right? So in this case, they still have $118 on hand. $80 was spent for tickets, maybe some sort of raffle ticket. I don't know what. Well, actually, it has down here. All right, I think office supplies, delivery expense, and then they're short $2. So somewhere somebody got $2 and change and didn't put it back. Okay, and then when you put the money back into petty cash, you actually debit the expenses that used up the petty cash. Y'all don't have to do that, so don't get too worried about it. All right, the bank account is what we're really going to be looking at. So I'm going to make the bank account a separate video.